Hi, I'm Danielle Hartman. Welcome to Poured in PA, a series sharing the stories of Pennsylvania's craft beer industry. In today's digital forward world, it's not just what breweries are posting online that matters anymore. It's about what other people are saying and sharing about their beers. In this episode, we focus on the craft beer influencer, podcasters, Instagrammers, or bloggers, and their contributions to Pennsylvania's craft beer community.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Breaking Brews podcast, a podcast focused on the business side of beer and what's driving today's thriving craft beer industry. Let's get this session started. All right, fuck it, let's just roll. Nate, what's up, man?
How's it going?
Good, dude. Welcome to the studio.
Ironically, I owe Breaking Brews to Big Beer. I was at a bar down on the North Shore here in Pittsburgh called Beerhead. It's now called Mike's Beer Bar. Before a Pirates game, just hanging out, and a gentleman came in and could not get. They don't serve Bud Light, Miller Lite, all the big products there, and he was very upset about this and was throwing a bit of a tantrum. And when he finally did settle on a beer, which was a Yingling, when they went to go get his beer, he just happened to look right at me and say, "How the hell does this place think it's going to survive without Miller Lite and Bud Light?" It got me thinking about how I was when I first discovered craft beer, how I really didn't know a ton about it. And as the industry was growing and starting to really evolve, I felt there was probably a lot of other people out there just like that guy, just like me when I first started, that didn't know a lot about it. So I wanted to create something that could educate but entertain at the same time and not be pretentious. Basically, I just went after some very simple topics that would help introduce beer drinkers to the products that we all know and love today. And in addition, talk about the culture of craft beer, both in Pittsburgh and beyond.
So what was it like traveling all over Pennsylvania and discovering these stories, business practices? And
what I'm looking for with the content that I'm building is to have industry folks 2, 3, 4 years from now stumble upon this and say, this is helpful. This is helping me get my start, because I'm bringing on industry professionals that have lived these experiences. So they're telling their stories. And that story is going to help a person who might have that idea of, I really want to start a brewery, but I'm not sure where to start. What should I do? So different aspects of the show are going to be able to help them get a good start. And then it will connect them to that person. We're providing social media information and direct contact info in some cases. And I've talked to everybody that I've had on as a guest. They're more than happy to help out, which is just another sign of how tight our industry is. Welcome back to the Breaking Brews podcast. The barrier to entry to start a podcast is not very hard. I mean, look at my setup here. We're in my basement in a room I used to use as storage. I transferred it into a little studio, which is it makes the product sound more professional. It didn't take much. And I think that's what a lot of people are going to continue to notice, is that I could start a podcast too. As long as the content is valuable and it's going to provide folks with some information that they can learn from. And, having learned from experience, you can't just chug a bunch of beer and then sit down and record, because that's just not what anybody wants to listen to.
I was just fucking laughing at we brought this pod, kid. You understand? We in here drinking, swinging, all that shit, dog. We sweating, getting wet.
All right. Welcome to the 216th episode of the Drinking Partners Podcast. Yes, this is our Los Angeles Lakers episode.
It's funny, like, after all these years, I don't know how to define it. It's like the way it is for me, it's two guys having a good time over craft beer, meeting great people.
It started out with a couple of comedians trying to get their name out there. We got introduced to the craft scene. I mean, it just kind of took off from there.
Damn, this folks, see, you know you got a lot of money when you can cross your leg and both feet touch the ground. Yeah. Damn. Wow.
Yeah, the cast is basically just a furtherance of the conversations we had at the open mics. Like, we would just stand in the corner, have these conversations. People would come around and just listen to us go back and forth and riff. And we're like, yo, if we put this on wax,
Yeah.
It'd be dope.
Yeah, we literally like getting shit faced, doing mics or whatever, and then just like looking around, and people were just like a circle around us, just like listening to us bullshit. I mean, back and forth. We hooked up with Buzzy with Epicast, and cause we didn't know shit about podcasting at all. Damn. Like, I mean, we know comedy, and we knew how to talk shit, and we like to drink because entertainment in the Pittsburgh region, is just an excuse to keep drinking it. It's an alcohol heavy city. So when a venue hires you, they go, hey, can you keep people drinking for 3 hours? If so, you're hired.
That's the hustle. Yeah.
So we knew that. We were very conscious of that when we went in, and we sat down talking about the podcast, and Ed was like, we should just call it Drinking Partners and just continue that same, conversation or whatever. And I was like, that's it on the head,
Tell us a little, because this is a craft beer show. Tell us a little bit about like how you guys feel the craft beer industry has.
Don't rush to this though. This shit
has affected the region.
It's a craft beer podcast in the sense that we are always drinking craft beer. But I wouldn't say to a craft beer person, listen to this podcast because you're going to get all this craft beer knowledge. Like, we're not knowledgeable individuals. Yeah, and there's some podcasts we're not even going to mention beer. We've talked to mayors, we've talked to comedians, we've talked to
musicians, artists.
Advocates. There's so many. It rained. Some people listen to us and they don't like craft beer. They don't really like. We got folks that don't drink at all, but they listen to podcasts because there's those comedic elements to it.
I think the most craft-esque or craft-like element is the collaboration. Like, that's what we noticed in the industry. So everything about the podcast is about collaboration. It's about, you doing something good. I have a platform. Let me talk about what you do because I rocks with it. You know what I mean? Like, there's never anyone on here that we like, we're just doing this for clout. Like, it's always genuine love, and that's what we've experienced within the craft industry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Beer Busters. We're going to bring in the news and reviews of your favorite brews. My name is Dan Baker, and I am joined by my co-host and brewologist,
Steph Heffner.
And of course, the demented and fermented
Wayne Baker.
We're back.
Beer Busters started probably 2013. I had a background in radio. Couldn't really find an on-air job anywhere, so I decided I was going to take matters into my own hands. Steph was a brewer. She wanted to open her own brewery at the time. So I figured, hey, let's start a show where I get to show I can host something. We'll promote your beer should you ever actually open your own brewery, and we'll go from there. And then Wayne joined as our first guest, and we kept him on as graphic designer and a co-host by the second episode.
We didn't want to be premature. We wanted to make sure that things were completely solid.
We mostly have brewery owners, brewers. We have had home brewers, sales reps, anybody who is connected to a brewery and would like to speak about it and maybe promote their beer and just have a good time.
That's something that's really interesting about the podcast, is having a variety of guests. You get to hear the side of the brewer and the brewery owner, but that's a very different experience from the beer rep. And we've also interviewed maltsters and hop farmers. So to get a perspective of the beer industry from multiple different positions, it's been really enlightening and really interesting.
I would really hope that we reach a lot of people who are also just starting to get into beer, because one of the things we really try to do is not be super pretentious when we talk about beer and not be like super insidery. We try to be very straightforward. We try to talk about beer in a way that is technical and based on our knowledge that we have of it, but also talk about it in a way that somebody who's just getting into craft beer can kind of latch onto and understand, and just talk to the people who are making it and talk about other random things as well that I think help a lot of people sort of just getting into the industry who want to know what's going on with craft beer.
Sorry, ask your question.
You guys seemed so tired
Yes.
at the first Little Big Beer Fest.
I think podcasts humanize the beer industry. We provide a platform for brewers and brewery owners to tell their story, and for the average beer drinker to get to know them, because it is no longer just about if your product is good or not. People want local. They also want to know the people that are making their beer. They want to be recognized when they walk into a brewery and they order a beer. So I think listening to the brewery story and listening to their funny insights on the industry, I think it gives a connection to the craft beer drinker.
It's a good way to bring the community together as a whole. I mean, if you have a podcast you listen to, hopefully Beer Busters, then you get to see what's happening in your local community and maybe on a wider scale too, maybe nationwide or international. It's really just helping to round out the industry overall. The single most important thing that a podcast can do for brewers is to give them something to listen to for several hours while they're brewing beer. And we've actually heard from a lot of brewers who say, I turn on your podcast during my brew days, and that, I think, is the best service that we provide to brewers.
Podcasts can also allow brewers to educate their consumer as well, whether it's educating them about their business or the products that they're creating. I think that's an important aspect of it too.
Information is incredibly important. It's the biggest commodity that we have, and we want to make sure that the people who come here have all of it. So I do all the canning designs, but I also run our social media accounts, so Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I do our weekly newsletter, and I make sure that everything online is up to date. It's very important to us that everybody has all the information they need, everybody knows when what can is coming out, what food truck we're going to have here on what day. So most of what I do is make sure that the people who love Grist House know everything that's going on at Grist House. For can releases, we always make an event on Facebook. Facebook, no matter how you feel about it, is still the easiest way to push events. So we'll create the event on Facebook and then share it across other platforms. So we're sharing it across Twitter, we're sharing it on Instagram. We do that mostly in our stories, where people can just swipe up and go directly to the event so that they can see all the information. You get a full description of the beer, when it's starting, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of kind of cross-promotional without cross-content. So I'm really cautious about making sure that the stuff I'm posting on Instagram is not auto-populating on Twitter and Facebook. Because if everything's the same, then people know they only need to follow me in one place. But in order to make sure that the most people get the most information, we're pushing it out in as many places as we can, including a weekly newsletter, which I know a lot of people think that email's kind of over, but we use it as an aggregate. It's almost entirely images. When you open our newsletter, you can scroll through it without reading a single word. You'll know exactly when all of our can releases are. You'll know what's going on without having to take any time out of your day. To say essentially just kind of a condensed version of what we're going to tell you on social media throughout the week. Beer on Instagram has become insane in the past couple of years. The power of the Instagram influencer is very, very prominent in this industry. And it's not just about the pictures the brewery posts anymore. It's about the pictures that other people post. And if you have a can that's fun to look at and fun to take pictures with and fun to find new ways to take pictures of it, you're gonna see it way more often on platforms like Instagram. Most of the creativity is coming from Instagram right now. That's a platform that's heavy towards females, which I think is really interesting, since this is an industry that people mostly associate men with. So once we get stuff out on Instagram, you see a lot of women taking these cans, taking incredible photos, and making lives for themselves off of being fans of this crazy industry. For me, obviously, it's really cool to see that. I've been in the craft beer industry for 8 years almost, and people still ask me if I like beer, which is very weird. So it's really cool to see this growing community of women on social media really making a point that beer's for everybody. It's very cool.
I think there's a really big movement with women in craft beer in general, especially just in the last month or two. I've seen a lot of hashtags girls drink beer too, or things like that, because it's still one of those things that might not be totally accepted, still shamed that, this is a, guy's industry, and it's clearly not. It's a balance, and in the beginning, I think to kind of get your name out there, you really have to like just post a lot, and that can be overwhelming. I felt it a lot in the beginning. I was like, I have to post every day, and I have to have stories every day. And now I've tried to like take a step back and, you know, find that balance between, okay, I have a real life, and this is, you know, this is a fun hobby, and to have fun with it. At times it can be a little overwhelming between trying to keep up with it, and, you know, you're always going to have negativity and people are going to say negative things. Some of the negative comments that I think a lot of influencers get, female influencers get, is either they're not knowledgeable on their beer, they're criticized on their body, they're criticized that the only reason people follow their page is not because of beer, it's because of the way they look. It's nice to be able to reach out, you know, to some of the other influencers, and, you know, they get the exact same comments. So you're like, you know what, you can't take any of this seriously. It's just the people the way they are. Why do I do it? It's fun most of the time. It's a lot of fun, you know. I feel like I've met so many people through this that I never would have met. I have got to try beers that I never would have got to try. And even though you do have a lot of negative comments, you have a lot more positive comments and people who do appreciate, like, oh, hey, thanks for letting me know about this, or just appreciate your input. I post a lot of sours and people do tend to like the sours. You know, they're pretty colors. I know that sounds silly, but people like pretty beers. It's really nice, you know, if they have the name of the beer and the brewer on the same one, which never happens. So, you know, you have to like hold it one way for this photo, one way for the pour shot. Can art is huge.
When we put out a can, we want to make sure that they're all related to one another. There are through lines in our cans that are always the same. Where all the information on it is, where you're going to find the ABV, where you're going to find the name, that's always the same. But we really like to do some loud, crazy can designs, because once they get out there, I know I'm going to see it all over the internet if they're fun. As fun as possible is kind of the goal. Doing the can designs is my favorite. It's a lot of me typing really weird things into search engines. The chameleon can, just me looking up chameleons and staring at them for a while. I lucked into this, and I'm kind of waiting for someday someone to come up and be like, wait, you don't belong here. You're not supposed to be doing this. I didn't go to school for graphic design, but I love this stuff, and I think it comes across in the product that we put out. It's fun, so it tastes good.
Cheers, I'm Russel Krause. Tonight on Drunk History. Sorry, that's what it feels like.
As soon as you started that sentence, I knew what you were. Okay, you're good. Yep. I thought maybe Mike was giving you a shout, but you don't.
I just got a weird looking face. My buddies and I made a bucket list to visit every brewery in Pennsylvania, right? And so back then, didn't have a family, didn't have kids, you know, some of us had started jobs, some of us were in graduate school. And back then it was 60 breweries in the whole state. Pennsylvania is a big state geographically, but there were still only 60 breweries. And so we did some of the greater Philadelphia, Eastern Pennsylvania ones. And then, you know, life takes over and we got jobs and we did those things. And it wasn't until like after we had kids that we were like, hey, you know what? We're kind of stable now. Let's see. Should we maybe revisit that? And that was when it started, the tracking of the breweries and this and that, because I remember pulling it up and just being like, good Lord, look at how many breweries there are now. The 2013, 14 time range. Oh my God, there's over 100 breweries now. And it was just kind of like, oh, I can't believe nobody's keeping track of this. It makes sense now because it was all so new, but as a consumer at that point, it seemed weird that there wasn't a consolidated list. And that's when we sort of said, hey, we don't need to just visit these breweries. We need to be providing information about where they are, even the fact that they exist, and then what they offer. PA Brew Review is a mobile-friendly website. It's essentially a consolidation of all independent craft breweries in Pennsylvania. We list them on map format. We also list each of them on their own individual page. And then we also have a statewide events calendar. And it comes combined with a sort of a feedback rating system for consumers to leave their experience of the brewery. And that's essentially what it all started as, was the idea that going to a brewery was more than just the beer. The thing we run into a lot is in brewing, everybody has their own individualized style. True with the beer, true with the brewery experience, true with the food. And it's easy for a brewery to say, this is what I do. I brew lagers, or I have a small space, or I like a big space. And that's what I want to do. And if people don't like it, that's fine, because that's what I'm invested in. And that's great, that's fine. But if there's some concern about staying relevant, staying in business, there was no resource for those breweries to know what it was about sticking to their ideals that might have been a chance for them to flex a little and improve that situation. And so that's a large part of what we're trying to do. We're on the surface a consumer-facing website, but on the back end, we have a lot of tools that breweries can use to figure out what people like about the experience, what people don't like about the experience, and then they can make those decisions. We get the tag influencer. People say we're influencers, people say we're in that space. It's probably the closest space to define it as, but we've done our best, or we hope we've done our best, to remove ourselves from that role where we're letting the consumers speak on one end and we're letting the breweries obtain that information and make their own decisions on the other end.
Social media is everything when it comes to promoting beer right now. People look to websites like ours, they look to other influencers, if you want to call them that. What's new, what's the new trend, what's hot in the industry. So I think we've been able to leverage these platforms and really get the word out.
If you are a fan of Pennsylvania craft beer, you can probably find it on our site. We've got several interactive maps where you can find breweries that are dog friendly, you can find breweries that are kid friendly, or you can just go onto a map that shows all breweries throughout the state. We've also got a resource of grand openings, so which breweries are opening in the state, or we've got a resource where breweries are expected to open. Maybe they haven't set their grand opening date, but they plan on opening. And then we've got reviews of breweries. It's really become this one-stop shop for all things Pennsylvania craft beer.
And we're focusing on, I would say, the culture too. We're building a community of craft beer drinkers across all the platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We're just really encouraging people to talk to each other. Craft beer doesn't have to be this, beer snob thing. We really want to build and foster the communication. I think that's the most important thing.
Social media has good parts, right? But it's also got it's not necessarily bad parts, but the areas that it can improve, if you will. One thing that I always remember hearing from a brewer in Pennsylvania was he had said, beer is no longer made in the tanks, it's made on the keyboard. And what he means by that is, if a beer gets a certain hype, buzz, or the right media outlets run with it, now all of a sudden it's not about the taste of the beer as much as it's about the hype of the beer and having to get that. So we'll find a lot of times social media will create a false sense of this buzz, if you will. Not that the beer's not good, but you wonder, why did this beer get all the publicity, all the hype, when I could name you 5 beers within walking distance to major metropolitan areas that are probably significantly better than that beer, but because they didn't get some sort of hype or buzz around it, no one's really talking about it. So social media has definitely fostered this sense of, I don't want to say inflated self-worth by any means, but unfortunately not always the best messages are getting delivered. So it can be, it's a tightrope to walk in that sense.
One of the biggest problems that we've had is that the social media influencer, the beer blogger, all of this type of sort of ancillary industry that has sprung up from the explosion of craft beer in Pennsylvania has sort of muddied the waters. You get drowned in noise, I guess, and breweries are getting inundated every single day with requests from people Not that there's anything wrong with that, but some of them are charity requests. Some of them are, can you send me a free t-shirt because I have a beer blog? Can you, whatever it may be, they get overwhelmed by it.
Social media is affecting the industry because it's giving the consumer a voice to voice mainly their opinion about the products they're drinking with platforms especially like Untapped, but even social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter, where they're able to rate and review and share their opinions about different beers and different breweries, which is okay if it's constructive, but nothing irks me more than when someone checks in an English mild and they're like, 1 star, I don't like English miles anyway. And then I'm like, why did you order it? Like, I don't know. So as long as it's constructive feedback, I think it's great for breweries, but sometimes people's opinions can affect whether or not someone's going to try a beer. And I just encourage people, like, go drink the beer. Who cares what other people have rated it and what other people have said about it? Like, you need to make an opinion for yourself.
You're on?
Good.
All right, so tell me a little bit of how Black Brew culture came about.
So Black Brew culture came about around 2015. We were home brewing with aspirations to start our own brewery. And, brewed some good beer for a little while, about a year or so. And we just decided it was a little bit more work than we could handle. So started to look around to see what other avenues we could approach in the industry. In regards to just being black brewers, seeing people in the industry that look like us doing the same type of thing, and as we got some network and some connections going, we decided to do an online platform. We call it Black Brew Culture, dedicated to supporting black-owned businesses, black-owned breweries, making connections between breweries and the community, highlighting businesses and their events, some of the unique beers that are coming out. So we decided the platform was helpful in getting exposure to a lot of breweries that might not have the time or the resources to get out there and promote their products. The city's changed significantly. Hasn't been an extremely diverse presence in the city while I grew up. I think one of the factors that has made it more diverse is the connectivity to the rest of the country with the internet and with social media.
Give it up for Sean Bailey, everybody.
Due to the help of some people putting in some serious work, like myself, Day, Bracey, Ed Bailey, other groups, we're starting to expand the cultural range of craft beer, specifically in the city.
In Pittsburgh, there's a lot of dope stuff going on. You know what I'm saying? I don't even know if I can curse.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, there's a lot of dope shit going on.
That's the mission. I mean, there's so much dope shit going on in the area, and we have utilized our platform to kind of, catapult that. There wasn't really a voice for a lot of people. There was the big media, companies, and everybody was trying to get, an article written here or a shot here or whatever, even us, trying to do whatever. And it was all right, we can either keep, trying to get their attention, or we can, make our own type thing.
The industry, they wanted a voice. We were willing to give a voice, and they recognized that, hey, this could be something that could be powerful. They showed us love. And for me, I didn't even know anything about craft. So to get that type of love and not really know anything about the industry, and I'm coming here to learn. They're like, yeah, we'll hold you down. We'll teach you.
You know what's about to happen, right? You love us. You see us in public. You tell us that you love us. Now, at the click of a button, please tell the internet. Please tell the world.
The more people that can gravitate to a movement and help push it forward, to me it feels like that everybody should just continue to embrace that. And that's where I feel the beer writers and the bloggers and the podcasters and people doing videos, much like we're doing today, is does nothing but help the industry thrive and spread the message of what they're all about. And I think for us, it I've always looked at it like the outer fringe, quote unquote, that we're not necessarily in the breweries brewing every day and serving beer across the bar to different customers, but at the same time we can still share a passion for this liquid that has brought us all together And the response from the people that own these breweries and work in these breweries has been nothing but positive. I think they've realized that having that additional voice out there to help push their brand forward just helps build more loyalty in their product, and it shows them that people are gravitating to what they do, and it just makes the whole scene evolve and continue to thrive.
I think that a lot of marketing from here is going to be third party. It's always been about the beer drinker anyway, so why not? Why not lean into that? It's never really been about us. It's always been about them, so might as well give them the power.
Speaking of social media, don't forget to follow us on all platforms at Poured in PA. Before we go, let's check in on our brewery spotlight. In central Pennsylvania, big events and creativity shine bright at the Brewery at Hershey. Until next time, cheers.
I heard that the partners here were looking for a beer maker. The winemaker was a home winemaker, so they decided to look for a home brewer to be their brewer. One day I was sitting around, I had some beer on hand, I brought it out here to check out the place and meet the guys. We just sat around drinking beer. It was very loose, very casual, we were joking around, had another tasting, and the next day they asked me to come on as partner and brewmaster. Some of the beers that they asked me to make during the interview audition period were ones that actually became our beers. Chocolate Milk became one, the Wise Guy was brewed that day, so was Naughty and Spiced. Once I came on as a partner, I did have to figure out how to build a brewery. A lot of the tanks are recycled or repurposed tanks. I've got a few dairy tanks. I've got old tanks, some of them are marked 1957 and 1960. Stainless never fades, so they are as perfect as they were the day they were made. I did kind of build a giant homebrew system. There's several ways to set up a brewery, but I pretty much blew up my 5-gallon homebrew system into a 10-barrel brewery. On a highly manual system like this, there's things that go wrong. There's things that, new problems that pop up. It's guerrilla brewing sometimes. I've had to make up stuff, whatever it takes to make beer. Brew days are my Christmas morning. I'm up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm here by 5 and trying desperately to pound a beer out by 2 o'clock, and then the rest of the day is mine.
And so what I'm going to do, we were going to do tour and then tasting and then lunch, but I think
definitely always open to it, always anxious to use local products. I'm a big fan of Deer Creek Malt. I try and use their products when I can. I've worked with some local hop farmers too. I've even used products from our own farm here. We have a brewer's garden. I've used watermelon and blueberries from our garden. I've got a firkin on the way that's packed with our Columbus hops. Customer favorite beers, usually maybe the Palm Beach. The Chocolate Milk is pretty popular over the winter time. When you kick 2 tanks of Flash Gordon in one day, that's pretty popular as well. I do like to do kind of crossover brews from time to time. I do have a firkin of Hippie-Ki-Yay and crushed Niagara grapes that we grew here. I've done a few beers there where I've taken the fresh pressed grape crushings and incorporated them into beer, and it's really good results with that. I've used wine yeast to make beers before. Did a blonde ale with a Moscato yeast that turned out very good. Paul's the expert over there. He makes the wine and ciders. I've used some of his cocoa nibs and brandy soaked oak chips on a beer. I like working together and pairing and coming up with new flavors with that, but he's the expert over there. Conversely, I keep him out of my brewery. You're going to find a lot of people here that are definitely here looking for a good time, for live music outside. Decked Out Live here is amazing. We usually get 500 people out here very comfortably. We always have great bands playing, the beer's flowing, no lines. Everybody seems to have a good time. A lot of people even electively sit down in the vineyard or over by the bonfire, and it is a good time. I wish I could make more. My favorite, between the Straws and the Stripes in July and Flash Gordon Merlot Day, they're both fun. They're a lot of work for the people that are here. We're here 14 to 16 hours on that day, but The fact that we get thousands of people coming here in one day and offer something that I made or Paul made is fantastic. I think there's a real sense of community here. There's a lot of regulars here that know each other and you keep coming back. And that's what matters most of all to me, when people try your stuff and come back is the best. So, all right. Woo!